in association with Zaz Comics, Inc. Captain Underpants and the Waistband Warrior Retrospective! These are the console warriors, Logan, Will, and Alex. Logan is the one on the left with the messy hair and the frown, Will is the one in the middle with the beard and the cool tie, and Alex is the one on the right with the cape and the buzz cut. Remember that now. On their channel, they upload Let's Plays, skits, discussions, and horrible singing in the car videos. Recently, they went to a comic expo where Alex cosplayed as a superhero like the world has never seen before. But why did he choose this particular hero? How was he introduced to the Waistband Warrior, the semi-clad savior, the amazing Captain Underpants? Well, before I could tell you that story, I have to tell you this story. Growing up, I was a quiet kid, kinda shy, but when I did make friends, I enjoyed making them laugh and acting like a goofball. Blame cartoons for that. But making friends was hard for me, so a lot of the time I would keep to myself. You ever have a teacher that you just didn't like all that much, that no matter what you did, you were just always at odds with? I had one back in kindergarten. She was just a little too strict, you know? Didn't help that she was the one that taught us math, addition, and subtraction, and cursive handwriting. A nearly pointless skill in this day and age where people preferred to fill things out electronically. Print was easier, but no, it had to be cursive. Punishment for acting out was to write full pages of your name in cursive, which just furthered my dislike for it. I tried to make it more fun by doing silly things like putting little hats on the letters or ending each curve with like a little pigtail or something like that. My teacher didn't like that and made me start over. And it wasn't just me. Years later, my kid sister had the same teacher and a very similar sour experience. But one of the things that stuck with me was her telling me that I couldn't read. I loved books and would read the Spot Puppy picture books as well as the If You Give a Mouse a Cookie books. Loved those. And I'd like to show that I could actually read them by reading them out loud to other people in the class and just kind of following along. But she said that I just memorized the books and wasn't actually reading them. That really upset me a lot. I always remember having trouble with the mouse books because of the word chances. I couldn't ever seem to get into my head that the CH, when written out, put together, make the ch sound. So I always said chances are, because there was always that one part where near the end where it goes, and chances are if you give a something. But if I couldn't read, how would I always make that mistake? Anyway. Going into first grade, my appetite for books only increased. The teacher would read us Junie B. Jones or the Magic Treehouse books and have us follow along, but I would read ahead and actually finish the books before everyone else. While everyone worked their way through one, I would check out like 4 more and just devour them. I just loved getting lost in the worlds and adventures books could take me on. It made me want to tell stories of my own. Then when I was about 7 or 8, a few years later, my mom took me with her to visit a friend who had her own kids way out of town. It was a very long drive. They had a boy a little older than me, so I just kind of hung out with him while the adults were playing. And after playing around with the PlayStation 2 version of Fairly Odd Parents Break Into Rules, I discovered something that would change my life forever. A little book called The Adventures of Captain Underpants. But before I can tell you that story, I have to tell you this story. A long time ago, on the other side of the country, there was a guy named Dav Pilkey. No E in his name due to a misprint from when he worked at a Pizza Hut. He just kind of made that his own and stuck with it. It's hilarious. As a kid, he was diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia. But back then, that wasn't properly recognized or treated as it is today, so he got in trouble for acting out in class and was often sent out into the hall. It was there that he created the world's greatest superhero of all time, the amazing Captain Underpants. His teacher gave him some constructive criticism, tearing his comic up and telling him he couldn't spend the rest of his life making silly books. Thank goodness for me and the rest of the world, Dave wasn't a very good listener. In 1997, after already making a name for himself with other children's books, Dave brought his childhood creation back to take the world by storm. The Adventures of Captain Underpants. Action, thrills, laughs. The first epic novel by Dav Pilkey. A big, bald guy in his tighty-whities with a stylish cape standing triumphantly on a building with two boys clinging on the edge. The cover immediately grabs the attention of just about any kid, and I was one of them. The book is about this pair of kids named George and Harold who like to make comic books and play pranks, the pranks often getting them into trouble, something that recurs throughout the series. Their most popular comic book is Captain Underpants, a Superman-type parody where the joke is how superheroes basically fly around in fancy underwear, except this guy just goes around in his actual underwear. Simple, but hilarious. In every book, there's usually a chapter where we read one of George and Harold's comics with it somehow tying into the main plot. The art and spelling being the quality of probably what a fourth grader could draw or write, with it progressively getting better as the characters grow throughout the series. We are then introduced to the boys' mean principal, Mr. Krupp. A man that hates children and fun, which just makes you wonder why he even works in the educational system in the first place, other than, making others miserable. One day he finally has proof of George and Harold committing an elaborate prank and uses it to blackmail them into doing his chores, waiting on him hand and foot, and doing laborious amounts of homework. Desperate, they send away for a 3D hypno ring in the mail and use it to hypnotize Mr. Krupp so they can destroy the evidence. Amazingly enough, it works. Then the boys decide to have some fun making Krupp act like various animals before getting the idea to turn their principal into their greatest creation. Krupp rips off his clothes, grabs a curtain from his window and ties it around his neck, and Captain Underpants leaps off the comic page and into reality. While the boys crack up an hysterical fit of laughter, Krupp jumps out the window and goes off to fight crime. Not wanting to get him killed and having his blood on their hands, the boys follow. The captain gets himself into a fair bit of trouble after foiling a bank robbery, and the cops realistically trying to arrest him for public indecency. But then an interesting twist happens when a pair of robots rob a giant diamond, and Cap's cape gets caught on their getaway truck. Turns out supervillains are real in this world, even if the only superhero is a delusional middle-aged man. The boys give chase and discover an actual supervillain planning to blow up the moon. With the captain tied up and powerless, the boys use some quick thinking to distract the bad guy so they can free him. But then they are found by the robots and forced into using incredible graphic violence, which can only be shown through the cheesy animation technology of Flip-O-Rama. Most of the action scenes in the series were told through these little flipbook-like scenes, and it was just awesome! Makes you wonder why other people never really tried this, since it really engages you making the characters move to complete the scene. With the robots destroyed, they free the captain, save the world, and catch the bad guy. All that's left to do is dehypnotize Krupp, except it doesn't work for some reason. Desperate, George dumps a vase of water on his head, which changes him back, but at a price. Since Krupp will now change back into the Captain Underpants persona whenever he hears someone snap their fingers, thus setting up a sequel. I loved this book. I loved it so much I read it 3 more times that day. Then I just stared at the art, the expressions, everything. I wanted to find the next one, conveniently advertised on the back, Attack of the Talking Toilets. Seeing how much I liked it, the older kid let me keep it. Now, when I'm passionate about something, it just kind of takes over my brain for a while. So, for a while, my mind was all about Captain Underpants. Whenever the latest Scholastic came out, I'd beg my mom to let me buy one of the books. At the library, I desperately searched to see if there were any new ones. I couldn't get enough of the adventures of these 2 mischievous boys and the zany guy who thought he could fight hit crime in his briefs. I'd read the whole series over and over again every moment I had free in class. I was even inspired to make my own comic books. Now, a little bit about my comic book making career. I loved the Captain Underpants character, but he was just too hard for me to draw, so I just drew my dog, slapped on some underwear, a cape, a domino mask, and an emblem, and thus, Super Fancy was born. An unoriginal OC. Yeah, I was a true fan. Most of my comics were just slightly altered takes on the comics in the books, though I did give my hero a sidekick, a dachshund with jet boots named Super Cheerio, inspired by the dog in the Hank Zipzer novels by Henry Winkler, and I was also into those at the time. Eventually I retired the Super Fancy comics and just kind of stuck around with doodling until about 8th grade, and at the time I was really into the Archie Sonic the Hedgehog comics, and me and my buddies came up with our own fan characters. Smolder the Hedgehog, Zack the Bear, and my character, Jughead the Duck. Again, my unoriginality shining forth, Jughead the Duck just being one of my favorite Sonic characters, being the Dynamite, but with a propeller beanie modeled after my favorite Archie character, Jughead Jones, which was my nickname in middle school. Together, the characters were part of a comic I called Team Dynamite. Nothing revolutionary in my silly little stories, but it was all in good fun. I loved doing that. We called our group Zaz Comics Inc., me wanting to pay tribute to my Captain Underpants-inspired roots. Though we grew up and drifted apart, I still use the Zaz name in any of the comics I make today. I finally progressed to the point where I can draw the Captain himself, and now I make fan comics of Captain Underpants every now and then. He's just a really fun character to draw for me. It was the Captain Underpants books that taught me how to draw people, and while my art hasn't made too many significant improvements over the years, I am proud to finally be on George and Harold's level now, and I just love drawing Captain Underpants. He's just so much fun. I mean, look at this guy. Out of all the books, I think the 7th book was probably my favorite. Captain Underpants and the Big Bad Battle of the Bionic Booger Boy, Part 2. The Revenge of the Ridiculous Robo-Boogers. The series had started undergoing a few changes at this point, going from standalone stories to ending in cliffhangers. Captain Underpants had real superpowers now, and in this story, they introduced time travel to the mythos. After the last adventure, Mr. Krupp and the school tattletale Melvin Sneedley have accidentally switched bodies, and before they can find a solution, Krupp turns into Captain Underpants right in front of Melvin and flies off in his body. Discovering this, Melvin plots to get his body back, but keep the superpowers for himself, and blackmails George and Harold into helping him. We get to see a lot more of the Captain in this book, which is probably why I like it so much. I just love the character. He just causes a lot of trouble trying to be helpful, but there's no real threat to fight. So he just ends up cheesing off a whole bunch of different people. Eventually, Melvin's plan works, and Captain Underpants leaps out of the window to stop the bad guys, then falls 3 stories to the ground. Melvin refuses to save the people in danger until George and Harold make a comic about him defeating Captain Underpants. Really, dude? How petty can you get? People's lives are in danger. But despite knowing he no longer has superpowers, and not just being delusional like in the first 3 books, Captain Underpants rushes off to save the world, declaring that although Melvin took away his superpowers, he can never take away the power of underwear away from him. That line always gets to me. So George, Harold, and Cap get chased around by the Robo-Boogers and discover that vitamin C in oranges can kill them. And then Captain Underpants gets an idea. He lures the monsters towards him with probably the best Flip-O-Rama section in the series, the Underpants Dance.
Do the wedgie wiggle!
Little do they know it's a trap, with Cap having placed orange crates underneath the giant toilet seat in a variation of the squishy prank George and Harold came up with in the previous book. And so once again, the day is saved thanks to Captain Underpants and the boys, when suddenly Melvin shows up trying to take credit. The little snot. He gives Captain Underpants some locker room harassment, but our hero refuses to give in. Then George and Harold use Melvin's inventions against him, and everything goes back to normal, with Melvin getting chased by an angry mob that's formed of all the people Krupp and Captain Underpants upset while in Melvin's body. I just kind of skimmed over a lot of elements in this book, but if I were to go detail by detail, I'd be here a lot longer. But let me know if you want to hear a breakdown of each book, because I love this series so much that I would go through with it and do that if that is something you guys want to hear. Anyway, a quick aside about the squishy prank. I actually got in trouble for doing this in real life. The idea is to take 2 ketchup packets, fold them in half, and stick them under a toilet seat. Specifically those bumpy parts. When someone sits down to see a man about a horse, they get splatted. As a kid, I was curious to see if this worked, and so at my local after-school program, I went into the bathroom and set it up. Then I pressed down with my hands to make sure it worked, and it spilled ketchup all over my jacket. And when the teacher found out why I was coated in ketchup, I was punished. Even though I didn't intend to do that to anyone, I just got in trouble for, making a mess all over myself. In 2006, after the release of Captain Underpants and the Preposterous Plight of the Purple Potty People, Part 3 of an unbroken story started in Book 6. Dav Pilkey went into hiatus to care for his terminally ill father. At the time, I was a kid in 4th grade, and I didn't know any of this, and kinda wondered for the next 6 years when the next book would come out, if there were any new books coming out. There were a few spin-offs released at the start of the new decade, but it wasn't until 2012 until we finally got a new Captain Underpants epic novel. Dave's writing was still as clever as ever, even updating and including more adult jokes for those who grew up with the series and were now older like me. The Captain himself was still given increasingly minor roles, as the final few novels focused on George and Harold's characters as they decided to grow. We got to see the return of a few old villains, some more time travel shenanigans, and we get to see how George and Harold became friends and look at what their future would be like, with their own families and careers as professionals in the comic industry. Though the saddest moment for me, even sadder than to learn that this was going to be the last Captain Underpants book, was in Captain Underpants and the Sensational Saga of Sir Stinks-A-Lot. Captain Underpants gets his superpowers removed permanently, and the hypnosis is undone, thus erasing him from existence and effectively killing him. George and Harold don't even bat an eye after learning this. Their apathy at the destruction of the world's greatest superhero, their greatest creation, just kinda made me upset. While it has been shown the Captain was often a lot more trouble than he was worth, it's just kind of chilling to know that the very best part of Mr. Krupp will be forever gone, and he'll live the rest of his life being angry, miserable, and alone. Though the book does leave an open thread for if Dave ever wanted to continue, with a time duplicate version of George and Harold having time travel adventures. Currently, that is the end of the series, with the other George and Harold destined to grow up to have successful careers as comic book creators. We do get to see their journey to that future through the spin-off Dogman series, but some part of me will miss the Captain and his awesome alliterative adventures. And that was it. Aside from the Dogman books, Captain Underpants was dead. But then...
are now the greatest superhero of all time, the amazing Captain Underpants! Tra-La-Laaaa!
A movie, and not just any movie, the first epic movie. Maybe I'll go into what makes this movie so great in another video in greater detail than here, but you better believe I was hyped. A near-perfect adaptation of the source material combining elements from every book to tell the classic story. It even delves into things the books never bothered, like fleshing out Krupp's character, giving him something of an arc, the boys taking advantage of the split personality for their own purposes, and just progressively realizing how hard Cap is to control. And you just get a real look at how creative the medium can be with the movie switching art styles. There's 2D sketchy animation for the boys' comics, the beautiful CG that brings Pilkey's drawings to life, similar to the Peanuts movie, sock puppets and some claymation, and even the fight scene is done in Flip-O-Rama. It easily made its paltry $38 million budget back, even competing with Wonder Woman in the box office. And Weird Al Yankovic even gave the world another Captain Underpants theme song, which, if you're a fan of the books, you can appreciate the reference, and is an extremely nice touch. I must have seen this movie at least 3 times in theaters, and I just loved it so much. And while I wished for a sequel, what we got was almost just as good.
So George and Harold make comic books.
We're cool.
Me too. But they had a mean old principal who told them what to blah 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 blah. So they got a hypno ring and first they made him dance.
Then accidentally, kind on purpose, turned him into Captain Underpants.
Tra-La-Laaaa.
3 seasons and 2 specials dropped onto Netflix. The Epic Tales of Captain Underpants is a show I wish I had around as a kid. Filled with enough fan service and attention to detail as the movie, it's a great show if you just want to kick back and have some fun. Not exactly taking place in the continuity of the film or the books, it follows George and Harold doing what they've always done, with Captain Underpants there to save the day. Just like the movie, the show mixes mediums with cutaway sections done with puppets, CG, cutouts, anime, claymation, and so much more, with every fight scene done in a different style. Krupp gets a lot more character in the show as well, and he's just as dim-witted and accident-prone as the Captain, just without superpowers. He has his own quirks and history that make him almost as much fun to watch as the Captain when he's on screen. We also get all new characters with the boys' classmates. Melvin is as Melvin as ever, and we have new heroes like Sergeant Boxers and Plungerina expanding the universe. My only real gripes are some animation errors, most notably the inconsistency of Cap's cape in a few different shots, and the lines on his underwear being on his butt for some reason, as well as a few missed opportunities and plot holes, but the show's lemony narration and self-aware jabs kind of brush these complaints to the side. It's a show about having fun, and it sets out in what it achieves. As always, I wish Cap had more screen time in some episodes, and he sometimes reverts before he even gets a chance to shine, but there are other episodes that make up for that. His sheer stupidity and over-the-top zeal are what make him such a charming character for me. Maybe in the future I'll go into episode-by-episode breakdowns if that's something people want to see. Anyway, with the series on Netflix and Dave still writing Dogman, there's no shortage of new content from the world of Captain Underpants. George, Harold, and Cap are still there to inspire kids to have fun, be creative, and even remind older folks what it was like to be a kid and have fun too. Thanks for bearing with my rambling. I just wanted to give this series the love and respect it deserved, as well as tell my story with it. It helped me become the person I am today and inspires me to keep creating and being silly even when faced with responsibilities. To make a long story short, thank you, Dav Pilkey, the folks at Dreamworks, and all the amazing talent that's put their passion into bringing the Waistband warrior to life. Never underestimate the power of underwear. So long. Tra-La-Laaaa!